Hey guys, just a quick note. This will be the last episode of 2024. Ed is heading home to spend time with his family, and me, I'm staying here, but we'll be extra busy taking care of visiting friends and a whole bunch of other year-end stuff. But we'll be back with a new episode on January 1st, 2025 to ring in the new year on the right note, or at least our note. Happy holidays, y'all, and we'll see you back here in the new year. On this episode, we discuss the eternal question for long-term Bangkok expats: should I rent or should I buy?
So if you're looking to lay down some roots in Bangkok, you'll find a lot to discuss in this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to begin a maple syrup import business, but I ended up drinking the entire first shipment and losing my enthusiasm for the whole damn thing.
That's why the prices are so high now.
It's all my fault.
And I met Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 24 years ago. Fell in love with the way Thais express surprise or amazement by saying, "Oh ho," so I never left.
That's a good one. Years ago, we said, you know, you've been in Thailand for long when you start saying "oh" or "oi."
Oi. I don't like oi.
Something surprises you or something, and you go "oi."
But I like oh ho.
Oh. My friend said the same thing in China. She's Chinese. She said the same thing in China. If you start saying "hiya,"
Oh really? Hiya?
"hiya."
Oh really?
Yeah.
Dude, maybe we should do a show on all the different ways to express amazement in different languages.
That'd be a good one. We talked recently about all the different sounds that animals make.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's like Uncle Roger, the chef on YouTube. He goes, "Hiya." That's
really?
Chinese. Did you see Pai Lin? He reviewed her.
Oh, I saw that.
Pad Thai.
Yeah.
Yeah, our friend Pai Lin was on there, and yeah, she has arrived. I wrote her a message. I said that must be like Weird Al covering your song if you're a musician.
That's great. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about Greg's run-in with the traffic police who nabbed him making an apparently illegal lane change on Wireless Road, a positive story about a Thai company responding with surprisingly haste and seriousness to a complaint letter that we sent in, and two stories about tourists who met an unfortunate end in Thailand, one by a wild elephant and one by electrocution. Be careful out there, folks. To learn how to become a patron and get all this good stuff, plus full access to over 700 bonus and regular back episodes, click the support button at the top of our website.
Yeah, and a huge shout out to our comrade Graham and his family who are visiting Thailand from Australia. They know our weakness, Ed, so Graham swung by my office today for a quick coffee with his wife and two sons, and they presented us with a gift, and I'm going to show you. This is for you. This one is for you. He brought two of them. And this is for you.
Oh, geez. He does know us. Oh.
A 1 liter bottle of maple syrup.
Insane. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Graham. That's going to go towards my diabetes fund.
No, that is amazing. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Very generous. All right. Well, in this episode, we wanted to get into a topic that I don't think we've talked about much, and that is the pros and cons of renting a condo versus buying a condo in Thailand. Now, we're not breaking any new ground here since there are tons of discussions about this out there on the internet, but we recently watched a video on the topic on a YouTube channel called ThailandBound. And since Ed rents and I own, we started talking. And in the video, the host brings up some pretty good points, but we didn't think none of them applied right across the board, at least in our case. So we thought we'd weigh in and discuss which issues one needs to look out for when renting or buying a place to live in Bangkok. Now, neither of us are experts on this, Ed. We're just sort of random guys that have been doing that respective thing for years and years and years. But that does give you sort of some insight and some firsthand experience with how things work out. So what do you think on this?
For sure. Well, I love this topic. I'm not an economist, but I know how economists think. I'm not great at managing money personally, in fact, but I know how you should manage money. And the bottom line is, it all comes down to Excel. Excel is the solution to all problems.
Is it really?
A lot of people assume, I think a lot of people, especially when you're younger, you assume that buying is always better because you get to own something and it's going to increase in value. But the truth is, it's just a math problem. It's just an Excel problem. And it just depends on how much you have to pay to buy, how much you have to pay to rent, and a bunch of other factors which we're going to get into. And of course, just as a major caveat, this decision is going to vary by individual depending on many factors. Just how much money you have, where you are in life, what kind of security you need. You know, are you retired? Are you working? Do you have a family? Are you looking for an investment? There's many variables.
Right. It's very subjective, but like this guy went over in the video, and we're going to talk about. There's a lot of issues that sort of apply to everyone across the board.
That's right,
and we're going to get into a few of those as well, but a few of them are a bit more specific.
That's right
here, and they also might touch on some bigger issues too in terms of dealing with Thai culture and stuff.
And to be clear, we're mostly focusing on a foreigner who wants to buy a condo themselves, as opposed to having a Thai wife or husband buy and do it as kind of a partnership.
Yeah. So let's go through our cases here. So if for me, I rented for my first 15 years in Thailand, and that was fine. And to be honest, I never really had any ambition to own a place anyway. But there are some drawbacks with renting. So when I got married and we decided to buy a place, it's actually my wife bought the condo, which is very common for foreign guys here. So actually she's the landlord.
Right.
So I'm involved, but I didn't, my name is not on the lease kind of thing.
Right.
So that's my situation here. So my wife owns it. We own it, but legally speaking, I guess her signature is the only one.
So most of these thoughts or issues have to do with a foreigner actually choosing to own themselves. So foreigners can own condos in buildings as long as Thais own 51% of the units in the building.
Right.
And in general, there are maybe some exceptions in special cases, but in general, foreigners can't own real property or actual land.
Right. Like if you buy a house, you own the structure, but not the land.
That's right. So the one thing I like about the video, and we'll include a link to the video, is that he's just this guy who we don't know anything about him. He's just presenting some interesting issues. I think he does a good job of just bringing up things that you should be aware of if you're thinking about buying a condo. So none of this means you should not buy. It just means these are things you should be aware of so you don't get surprised down the road.
Yeah. Totally. So you want to go through these? There's 7 things that we picked out of the video here.
Yeah. So some of these overlap a little bit. The first thing you pointed out, which I was not that aware of, is he basically said that a lot of proper condos, like big developments, he thinks that there actually is dual pricing. So which we've talked about before, which I didn't know anything about this since I'm a renter. So I'm very pro renting. I think Bangkok is a renter's paradise. So that's what we're kind of talking about. But he says that the proper condo developments, they actually charge foreigners more to buy a condo. Do you know anything about this?
I didn't. That was the first time I'd heard it applied so broadly to condo buying, but it's such a common thing here for foreigners to be charged more for anything.
That's right.
That it kind of makes sense. I remember when we had, we moved into here, we got some shelves made at a little place down the street. We got some kitchen shelves made. And, I remember I went in and talked to the guy and I said what we wanted and how big they were. And he gave me a quote. And then a week later, my wife went in and, it wasn't really planned this way, but she asked as well. And for roughly the same thing, her quote came in way cheaper.
Yes.
And I think we've all been experienced that for whatever it is, whether it's
I didn't realize that
food or
right. I didn't realize it applied to condos. Now, that fact alone doesn't necessarily matter, except it does matter when it comes to resale. So, for example, if let's just use round numbers. Let's suppose a Thai person can buy something for 4.5 million baht, and I paid 5 million baht for it.
Right.
Well, then if I want to sell it, I'm at a disadvantage compared to a Thai owner with a similar property.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially when you need to, what's the word? Amortize that loan.
Sure.
Off, like rent it out and pay that off. You've got to work that extra 500,000 baht into the lifetime of that loan over rent and stuff like that. So that all plays into it.
That's right. Now, I don't know anything about this. So listeners, we're curious about your feedback. He was suggesting that it's actually pretty normal for foreigners to have to sell to other foreigners who are kind of in the same market. He was suggesting there's almost two markets.
Yeah, I didn't really understand that. So it's just because, I mean, if a Thai would buy it for 4.5 and you would buy it for 5, then you maybe want to sell it at like 5.2.
That's right. But a Thai person's not going to want to buy it for that much because they can get it for less.
They can get it for 4.7. Right.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
That's right.
But it's interesting. I never thought about it like a dual market kind of thing. I never thought about it that way.
And obviously there's way more Thai people here than foreigners. So he's just saying, be aware that when it comes to offloading your property, it might be harder to find a buyer than you think.
Right. Yeah. So the second one that he mentioned, which is something that I've actually had almost firsthand experience with, and I think is really interesting, is that Thai buyers avoid buying a used condo or a pre-owned condo because they're worried about any bad luck or deaths or actions that the previous tenant might have taken that they're going to be not aware of.
That's right. And this is fascinating. We've talked a lot about superstition in Thai culture. I just didn't know if it really affected the property market.
Yeah, well, I think, and it's a really interesting cultural issue too, because, years ago, I remember a friend of mine lived at, I can't remember the name of the building, but it was a condo building on the far end of Wireless Road and Petbury Road. And I don't know if you remember, but in the 1990s, there was a terrible traffic accident there with a tanker truck that exploded.
Right.
And it killed like 92 people right on that corner. And
right.
I think that's part of why Petbury Road, at least a huge chunk of it, has never really recovered and developed.
Right.
And actually Bangkok Pat did a really good video on that recently. But, so as a result of that, the rent in her condo was ridiculous, like super cheap, because no one would rent there. They found it impossible to find renters. Of course. Yeah. And similarly, listeners who have been listening over the past year know that unfortunately one of my neighbors passed away in his condo, the guy just a couple of doors down from me. And
so that means I could buy it. I could buy it and get a cheap price.
Dude, I was thinking if my mom ever has to move here, like she's getting kind of old, and thinking like maybe I'll bring her over here so she can sort of retire here. I'll put her in the ghost condo. I'll get a really good deal on it.
Oh, that's a way to make her feel good.
Well, I wouldn't tell her. No. That would be unethical. No, that's unethical, Ed. Bad. I won't do that. I'll be a good son. But anyway, it's an interesting concept because, I mean, obviously, when you are in Western countries and you want to buy used, there's, you've got to think, was this a meth lab? Was this the scene of a murder? Or thing like that. But that's more of like the practical property values, not sort of like the spiritual or karmic value of the place, which we don't really worry about. But it's an issue here.
Yeah, we've talked before about that there's this Thai or Chinese preference for owning versus renting. But this is actually presenting a different issue. Yeah. It's pointing out that there's different reasons why they want to do that.
It's like why am I taking on this person's karmic debt?
That's right.
Or karmic entanglements. I don't want to do that. I want something brand new with a clean slate, and I can make my own karmic debt.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the third point is, in some sense, it's common sense, but this guy was warning to be careful about maintenance fees or management fees or fees that just come from being in the building. Like, I think everyone knows if you buy a condo, there's still going to be some building fees. But he was saying they can add up, they can increase over time. So you might have a deal and you're like, oh, it's going to cost me just 2,000 baht a month, the maintenance fees or public areas fees. But then that can go up over time. Yeah, it can. And for me, I think I can't remember what the square meter per cost is or something like that. But our place is not huge. But we pay about 60,000 baht a year in condo fees. Okay. So 5,000 baht a month. Place. Something like that, yeah. And I remember talking about this when I was moving in, I talked with our buddy Derek Van Pelt, who was a former guest on the show. And
and I was asking him, like, is it really worth it? And Derek said something very wise. Derek's very good at saying wise things. He said, you know what? He goes, I've owned condos. I've owned houses in Thailand. And when it all comes out in the wash, it's all the same thing. Like with a house, you might not have to pay condo fees, but you're also paying more maintenance and upkeep fees because you're the guy in charge and you have to take care of it. With a condo, you got a handyman that can come by, like the building handyman, and fix stuff for you. So you don't have to worry about that stuff, but you have to pay condo fees. So he said at the end of the day, it's really not worth worrying about. Either way, you're going to be paying stuff.
Well, I guess that all depends. I mean, I think that's probably true in some cases, but it depends on the data you have.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's very subjective. Now, speaking of spending money on a place for upkeep, another thing that he brought up in the video was that if a building has low occupancy, this could affect how much money is spent on keeping the building up to a certain level, a certain standard of repair. And, this is something that really bothers me about a lot of buildings in Thailand, not just condos, but office buildings and all these kind of things, is that when it's built, it looks fantastic and it's great and the services are great and the amenities are great and the swimming pool is beautiful. But after like 4 or 5 years, things start to get a little bit ratty and rough around the edges, but they don't seem in a lot of cases to keep it, to put a lot, like they don't put a new coat of paint on it, or they don't put the proper amount of money into keeping the wood painted or whatever it is. And as a result, because a lot of the properties are built, whether the condo, whether the demand is there or not, they're not maximum occupancy.
That's right.
And so the building just doesn't pay into it as much as they should, and they start to look a little bit shabby.
Well, obviously, this could happen in a building you were renting it. You're like, my God, they're not keeping it up. So as a renter, you can just move to a nicer building. But if if you own and they're not keeping it up, then you don't have many options.
Right. And I had first-hand experience with this in a place I lived in Chinatown. My condo itself, like the rooms I lived in, were beautiful, well decorated and renovated and stuff like that. But the building was a disaster. It was run by a bunch of idiots who didn't put any money into anything, and they were always cutting corners. So I remember, like, when I would be dating a new girl or something, and I'd bring her to my place for the first time, and they're like, "Oh my God, where's this weirdo taking me? This sort of
funny psycho killer."
Yeah, this derelict building. And then when I got to my condo, they're like, "Oh, it's actually quite nice." But
that's right. Yeah,
as a good example of that. But as a renter, I could just go, "Oh, that building over there is nice. I'm going to go live there."
Okay, another interesting point is that because there's so much building, the bottom line is condos are so popular in Thailand that they just keep building and building, even though the occupancy rate is low.
Right. Yeah.
And for new buildings, they're always adding new amenities to have a unique selling point. And so the problem is you buy a condo in a new building, but after 5 years, now your building does not look very good to like new buildings out there. And so this is this problem. If you're happy, again, everything depends on your situation. If you're happy to stay where you are for 20 years, great, no problem. But if you want to live somewhere for 5 years and then flip it and make a profit, the problem is now, actually 5 years, now your condo is old.
Right.
Though that's the way Bangkok works. Like if your condo is 5 years old, it's old.
It's like a computer. 5 years, you're like, ooh, it's like that's dog years.
Yeah, the new
computer's actually 22 years old.
When you bought your condo, there was an exercise room and a pool.
Yeah.
But the new ones now have a workspace.
Yeah, and I've seen
your condo doesn't have a workspace.
Well, we've got a little room behind the gym that might be all right. But yeah, and I see these on Instagram, these ads that are served up, and it's just, I don't know who these people are, but it's like, can we come and see your condo and how much you pay for it? And he's like, sure, follow me. And then it's a little video. And some of the buildings people are moving into now are beautiful. They've got party rooms and common areas and like big desks for digital nomads and stuff. But my building doesn't have that.
That's right. That's a problem.
So you're competing with that.
Yeah. And again, if you were renting, you could move buildings. If you needed any of those amenities, you could move.
Right. So as an owner, when I go to sell my place, someone's going to come by and be like, so where's the common area where the digital workspace is?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, there's a little room behind the gym that you can go to, and it might be hard for me to make the sale. So that's an interesting thing to think about too. So the next one is, when you own a place, and something breaks, you got to fix it, man. But when you rent it, you just call your owner, your landlord.
In theory. It's not always true, but yeah.
In theory.
Yeah.
And say, hey, the pipe is leaking. And he'll say, oh, I'll send someone right over.
That's right. I mean, so if you're a renter, and you have a good landlord, then it works. I mean, I have had some good landlord. You have a problem with something, call them and they come and fix it. But when you're the owner, you got to find someone to fix it yourself. Yeah.
Like what I mentioned earlier about, I think it was in the bonus show. I was talking about, I want to get new floors in my condo and I got to get new wallpaper, put in a new kitchen and stuff like that. That's all on me. And then that goes back to the first item, which is if I'm a foreigner and I'm trying to find a contractor, it's very easy to get caught up with an unscrupulous one who'll say like, ooh, this guy's a foreigner.
That's
I
right.
can tack 20% on the top of whatever I offer him. So it's like a double layered headache of finding contractors.
That's right. Now I can attest to the fact that my current landlord that I rent from, they don't really do anything. So I'm actually feel a little bit more like I'm the owner and that I have to get the contractor. But in theory, if you had a good owner, then that would be a big advantage to renting versus owning.
Yeah. And good owners are like, having a good owner is like finding a really good tailor. Like, oh, you got to go to my guy. Like, I can trust him. Yeah. So that's an interesting one.
Okay. Last point to wrap this up is one thing, even though there's a debate for each individual, is renting or buying better for me? You just have to accept the fact that Bangkok is good for renters. It is. It's just a fact. You have to deal with it. So if you're a buyer, you have to realize that you're competing with renters. If you want to flip or turn over your investment. So if you're someone who's like, hey, I'm retiring in Bangkok. I'm not going to flip this. I'm not going to move. I want to live here for the next 20 years. Then fine. You're good. But if you're thinking more Western style, where you're thinking, hey, I'm going to live here for 5 years. It's going to increase in value. I'm going to sell it for profit and then move to a better place. Well, in Bangkok, that might not happen because the rental market is so good. Like, this is just a fact. It's like the rental market here is incredible, which means that if you're a seller, you're competing against renters.
Interesting. That is an interesting wrinkle. Yeah. It got me thinking too about the variety of places. Like if you're going to buy a place here, the chances of you finding like a really cool, old, funky place are pretty slim because I think those are going to sort of kept in the family. But you're probably going to find a fairly newish condo that's been built in the last 15 years or something like that. And one thing you learn as a person living in Bangkok is that the buildings from like 20, 25, 30 years ago the condos are way bigger.
Oh, for sure.
Than they are now.
For sure.
They're like 150 square meters or something like that, where now the average spot is like 60 square meters,
No, a lot of the new condos are tiny.
Yeah. So if you're buying, I think there's a really, really lower chance probability of you finding a really funky place. But if you're renting, like we said, you can go and look all over the place and you can find some really big, cool places for a good deal.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say it again. I mean, it does depend so much on individual circumstances, but I'll make my point again. I think Bangkok is a renter's paradise.
Renter's paradise. Yeah. So there's one more secret thing at the end here, Ed, that I wanted to add on as well. And this is the dreaded TM30 form.
Right.
Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of the legality of it, and I don't know where and when and to whom it applies right now because these things change over time. But I had to deal with this a few months back when I moved to my new job.
Gotcha.
And basically, the TM30 is something that a landlord has to fill out for their tenant if their tenant is a foreigner.
Oh, gotcha.
And it tells the Thai government that I live here and I'm renting from this person. Now, because I basically live with my landlord, which is my wife, she's my landlord, so she had to fill out the TM30 for me.
Gotcha.
It was a stupid pain in the ass, a whole bunch of rigmarole. But if I owned the place, I wouldn't have to do that. I don't think.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
But as a renter, you don't have to do the TM30, but you have to make sure your landlord is doing it.
Right. So you have to do it as a renter. I had to do it as basically a renter, I guess on paper. I'm the same thing. But if I owned my place instead of my wife owning the place, I wouldn't have to deal with it. It's a small thing, but it's one of those pains in the asses that can come up and sort of derail a process in the middle of it.
Gotcha.
It's a real annoying thing to deal with.
Gotcha, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we bought a place. It's ours. We can invest in it. We can do with it what we want. But there's a lot of people out there that say it's a mistake to buy a place in Bangkok because the property values don't go up like you would expect in the West.
Well, it's
Other
highly
people
variable.
say it's a good idea.
I mean, it goes up and goes down. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but like we said before, it just depends. If you're someone who doesn't care about the investment value, then there is security to owning.
Yeah, that's me. That's me and my wife. We didn't do this to make a ton of money, but we like having our own place. It's something that's ours now,
right?
And will be my son's eventually, as long as we don't lose it.
Right.
We continue paying those condo fees. So anyway, it was an interesting video over at ThailandBound. Check it out and see what you think about that. But again, it's
basically just food for thought.
Yeah. And like we said, very subjective, different for everyone, but a lot of good things to think about if you're going to start thinking about buying your own place here or just continuing to rent. Good one. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we discuss to decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept just as something that we'd have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. And this week, Ed, it's all about you. What do you got?
All right, dude, let me paint a picture for you. You're in the grocery store.
Yep.
You're going to buy a can of something. You're going to buy a can of black beans, but you're worried about the salt content because, hypertension. You're old, right?
Well, I'm getting there, yeah. And I did buy a can of black beans the other day.
Oh, funny. Older. Sorry.
I'm older. Yeah. Right. No. So, old is always 10 years away.
That's right. So you turn the can around to see the salt content and blam, there's a label pasted on top of the can, which is in English, all in Thai. And you just want to know how much freaking salt is in the can, except now there's a Thai label obscuring the English.
Interesting. And this might be more of a comment on my current shape than anything, but I don't think I have ever looked at a can for the ingredients of anything.
Okay, well, that does say something.
But I have, for various reasons, needed to take that label off, and sometimes it rips.
That's illegal. You're not
sometimes
allowed to take
it rips. Well, you know what else I do? I cut the tags off mattresses too. Don't tell the police.
Damn.
But I'm a rebel. But sometimes it peels off the label underneath, and I can't read it, and then that pisses me off.
Right.
But normally, this doesn't even. I don't even notice this, so I would have to say this is
That's a live with.
Live with, yeah.
I'm a loathe man.
You check the contents a lot?
I'm an ingredient reader. I want to know what I'm eating. I want to know what's going on. And it's very frustrating. So I'm frequently trying to take the labels off, as you pointed out. But a lot of times they're not easy to get off. Like, it's pretty rare to have one that comes off easily and then you can put it back on. That's very rare.
It is rare, yeah. Yeah.
So I detest this. I think this is a horrible thing. Okay, I don't mind that the Thai government requires a label in Thai, but why put it over the English part? Just put it somewhere else on the can.
Usually a can is big enough that it can go somewhere. I don't need to see a picture of olives.
That's
right.
I
know what olives look like.
Obscure something else, but don't obscure the English ingredients, right?
Yeah.
Hello?
I'm down with that. But personally, I think for me, this is a live with bordering on not even an issue I have ever thought about.
Okay, but that's wrong. But that's you. But that's totally wrong. You should be paying attention to what you're eating.
Probably should. Yeah, you got a point. I probably should.
All right, I'm a loathe. I'm a huge loathe.
If I was healthier, I'd be loathe as well. But as of now, I'm around to live with.
When I become Thai Prime Minister, this is going to be in my top 5 things I do on day one. On day one, I'm going to take care of this.
We still got to do a show about that. If I was in charge, what would I do?
Oh, I like that. No,
that's a good one.
This would be day one.
Okay, interesting. Day one, tackling the big issues. That's a good one.
All right. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, BangkokPodcast.com on the web, or simply BangkokPodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. Send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show. Hit me up on Blue Sky at BKK Greg. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we'll see you back here next week.
For sure.